Hello. Well, welcome for joining us today on this very first episode of the videos for Cyber Week in Scotland. So hopefully this whole week we'll be able to impart quite a lot of information to you about how to get involved in cyber, about cyber for business, and so on. So today I have with me Neil Firminger from IASME. So and the idea of today is we're just going to have sort of a discussion on about cyber essentials and how it can help your business in becoming more cyber secure. So if I can just pass over to Neil. So Neil, just give us a quick overview of yourself and IASME, and then we'll get going.
Afternoon, Kerry. Yes, I'm Neil Firminger, and I am the Certification Technical Lead at IASME, and I've been with IASME on and off now for working with them for 3 years. My principal area of work is around Cyber Essentials and the Cyber Essentials Plus scheme. And when we became the sole partner for Cyber Essentials back in April 2020.
Wow. That's really good. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about is keeping ourselves safe, and this is one of the primary functions of what ID Cyber is about as well. It's about spreading the word about getting people safe online, and then of course, if they want to get some training or some assistance in going further, we're there to help. So as we're talking about cyber essentials today, specifically, I know when we started off with this, it started off with a process where we can stop the most common hacks that could be preventable. And the whole process was about how could we go about implementing something that can have a basic impact on cyber or on your system security. So if you had some of the basic practices that are in place, things will go a lot better and things becoming a lot more manageable. Now, the kind of sections that we're going to try and have a chat about today is about the 5 different sections on cyber essentials. So, and those things will encompass things like patching and so on. And if we're going to try and just work through this, we have to remember these are the basic, simple things to have in place. This is not a very intensive, very thorough look at your system security, but it's a place to start. And a lot of businesses are looking for this place to start. So, okay. So, if we start off, and one of the most common questions that we have a lot is about patching. And I know this is a very contentious part where folks are really asking themselves, should I really patch? Should I patch within 14 days? Should I patch in 30 days? Should I patch every quarter? Should I patch once a year? Or no, we don't have systems that can be patched. So how do we go from here? So what, according to you, is the specification on patching, for example, from IASME?
So the specification is to patch all high-end critical updates within 14 days of release. It's about and that Well, there's several things here that come into play. So you can make a judgment by the vulnerabilities and decide by what's called CVS scoring to decide what is a high and critical update. And you could meet those requirements, but the general thing is to apply all high and critical updates and be less selective, and perhaps just turn auto update on by default is the way forward.
Okay, so basically all of the things that we're trying to do is just configuring systems that we already have. Your operating system is make sure that auto update thing is ticked, and make sure
Yeah,
that critical and high updates are being installed within
applied.
14
Yeah,
days. Yeah. Okay. So
yeah, that's correct.
so it's not such a catastrophic thing for businesses in terms of, oh, we have to change our processes or anything else like that, because after all,
No,
this is
it
trying to keep them safe.
yes, exactly, and it's a pretty simple measure, and most of the vendors now are trying to push to a faster patching regime, or they are trying to, well, they're trying to encourage auto updating anyway.
Okay. So what if I have a Mac? Should I follow the same regime? um, should I still apply the patches when they're available, or is my Mac safe?
You should be applying the patches when they're available for a Mac. Like any other vendors' operating systems, they do contain vulnerabilities and they do regularly patch. We've seen that with, we see regular patching coming out from Apple on a monthly basis now, and they contain quite a lot of updates. So the advice would be to exactly the same, try and well, to apply those patches within 14 days. All that they've done now is these vendors, couple of them now, Google and Apple, have no longer no longer provide you with the information to say whether it's critical or high. So our advice would be to to put it on auto update and apply the whole pack of patches in one go.
Okay, well, that makes a whole lot more sense, because it
Mm.
makes it so that if there's a patch available, plug it in. Doesn't matter whether it's a critical
Mm.
or a informational one, or so on. It just means that
Yeah.
everything is up to date and so on. Now, quite often, what we have within the section is that things about passwords. Now, passwords. There's been many leaks in the last couple of weeks, and
Yeah.
it's so. So let's start off with passwords in its most basic form. So I have a password. So normally there's a password requirement for businesses in for to be part of the scheme, and it's quite simple. And it's like at the minimum 8 characters. So
Yeah, that's correct.
yeah, so you don't have to have to comply with this. You don't have to have a super long one. You just have to have a more complex one, and it doesn't have to be that a complex one. Now, some of the advice where previously, when you had passwords, there's now advice on what happens if your password gets compromised, or a password gets compromised. And it's like, do we have a process for changing those passwords now? And although I see that it is quite interesting that some organizations have a process and they have not, it's quite interesting to see that this is now part of the requirements. Now, how should passwords be managed? Is there some ideas around passwords? Would you say a password manager is a great way of managing passwords?
Yeah, if we to go down the advice route that has been offered and what we follow with the NCSC, yes, that's one of the methods is to use a reputable password manager. So that can be the one that's in your browsers, or you could get a further third-party application to do that job.
Okay.
Um, But there's other ways you could store it, passwords. There's still a requirement, and it stays in the requirements document about, keeping passwords in a sealed envelope and then put in a safe or something like that. So we try to encourage, best practice here at all
Yeah,
times. Those are the kinds of practices that are being adopted. We're not saying don't write passwords down. We're just saying that when you have written them down, store them somewhere very secure afterwards, and then preferably in a sealed envelope or something like that, and then you'll know whether it's been compromised yourself.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So I mean that's really good advice because often the advice we try and give about passwords is quite complex and so on, and we do realize that for many people, remembering difficult passwords is really a difficult
Mm,
thing. So
yeah,
so yeah, and these are all really good ideas on how to keep your password safe. And although
mm,
people say don't write them down, as you rightly said, there are
yeah.
ways you can keep them safe.
Yeah,
Now,
Cyber Essentials tries to be pragmatic in its approach, and because it's an all-encompassing certification, so we deal from sole traders right up to your largest corporates. We have to accommodate that, so it's very wide ranging, and some of the more complex measures where the small businesses can't afford to deal with those,
yeah.
we have to accommodate for them within the scheme and try and push them down the right direction about being cyber secure.
Okay, fantastic. No, that's really good advice going forward. Now, one of the other things that I suppose is the bane of a lot of organizations is that in the questionnaire is about antivirus, right? And
Yeah.
and there's like loads, and a lot of the questions that we tend to get as well. What is a good antivirus? Do I need to go and buy something specific? Do I need to buy a vendor A versus vendor B? Which one works the best? What would you recommend? And so on.
Mm,
Now, a lot of the things that people try and do is installing a free version of antivirus. They get
yeah.
a 14-day trial,
Mm,
and with the greatest intention, when the trial runs out, that they will go and buy it. Now,
yeah.
we often see that this is not the case. So, how would you recommend folks deal with a free antivirus for a certification?
Well, you need to go and check out what its facilities are, what functions it has. We see some of the free antiviruses offer a lot and seem to provide what the requirements are, but then suddenly you'll notice sometimes they say only included with the paid for version or something. We've
Ah,
seen this with a couple of examples recently where they don't include the real-time scanning engine, which is a requirement of Cyber Essentials. So you want to make sure that when you go on the internet and you're looking at your emails, it's going to check for any threats within those emails. Um, and often another thing that happens with free antiviruses as well is often they won't update as regular as the bought products either. And often they could be a few steps behind at something that's seen. So always the advice would be is, you know, there's some very good free ones, and there's definitely a very good free one that's built into the Windows 10 operating system, which is perfectly acceptable for Cyber Essentials, which is the Windows Defender security, because that does meet all the requirements. But some of the free ones don't. I always proceed with caution. You need to check out whether it meets the requirements. Okay.
yeah. Okay. So that's got quite a lot of the stuff covered. So, for
Mm,
example, so free ones don't have a real-time scanning engine, or some of them at least. So, which
yeah.
is a pain. So it may not protect you. The updates may not
Hmm.
be regular, and
Yeah.
certainly probably not past the 2-week trial period. So, which may leave
Yeah.
you very, very vulnerable towards that.
Yeah.
And if you're using Defender, that's great.
Mm.
It's there, it's
Yes.
free, included, set up,
Mm.
and it operates all kinds of other things as well, like Smart Screen that will try and block specific actions immediately
That's,
rather than, whoops, I should have bought the
yeah.
new one. Right.
Mm.
Okay. No, that's all good. So far, all of the things we've spoken about is stuff that we have that we didn't have to buy.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to
Yeah.
spend any extra money on
No.
patching. We didn't have to spend any money on managing passwords. We didn't have to spend any money on antivirus because most of them is built in. Now, various systems vary, and we'll probably come around to questions when they come up about Mac and so on.
Mm.
But for the vast majority of people, so far, they didn't have to spend any money yet. So
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. Because
just configure
there's
what
a
you've
lot of
got.
these systems. Yeah. Just configure what you've got in there. Yeah. And
Okay.
that may not. Just to be clear, that's very good for the SME sector, etc. But there will be, as long as you're configuring the basics, which are there and free, there's nothing to say you can't go to another degree with what you want to offer. And maybe you're not happy with what's offered freely and you'll spend the money on buying a different solution. But there's nothing to say you can't make that solution be configured to meet the requirements of Cyber Essentials as well.
Okay.
So yeah, there's lots of options out there in the marketplace, but always proceed with caution when you're configuring, but you need to double check they meet the requirements. And there's some very good products out there equally that you can build your cybersecurity on, but most of the requirements could be done with what's freely available and already built into your operating systems or the software. When we talk about auto updating, most of that is now configured as part of an application going forward, and you just need to find the setting somewhere and turn it on.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
while we're talking about free things that comes with
Yeah.
things, that would include the host-based firewall because Microsoft or the Windows operating systems now have been coming with a default firewall
Yeah.
for ages that
Mhm.
provides you from a trusted network and an untrusted network. So you can
Mhm.
basically take it away from your internal network to say a conference or somewhere,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that will be able to protect you, and going forward like that. So again, one more feature you don't have to pay for. You just have
Yes,
to
exactly.
you just have to make sure
Yeah,
it's enabled.
that's right. You should always make sure your software firewall is enabled, and that is a requirement, even when you're on a corporate network and you're relying on the internet boundary being a physical device. So that's a physical hardware firewall. Even then, you would want the software firewall on. So you want that turned on by default and configured to carry out the requirements of Cyber Essentials,
Yeah. Okay.
blocking
Fine.
those incoming ports, etc.
Yeah. So basically, I have a denial rule to say
Yes, that's great. Yeah,
when I've no when I'm out, don't allow anything in because you're not
yeah,
supposed to be letting. There's no reason
that's
why you
right.
would. Okay.
Yeah.
So, right.
It's
So
all pretty simple stuff.
yeah, and um, one of the things we try and get folks to do is not to overthink the questionnaire and
That's
not
correct.
to try and think of scenarios that are very, very difficult to mitigate. I often try and explain to folks if you're looking at the questionnaire or having to fill in the questionnaire, is about if this is day one at my job at company X, for
Hmm.
example, the machine that I've been presented with, how has my account been provisioned? How did I get one? What was the
Yeah.
process? I was given a username and a password. Was there anything that I was supposed to do with that password apart from change the default and choose a new one that's more than 8 characters long, right? I have a machine that has antivirus configured, and
Mm,
it's not a free one because we want to keep protected and so on.
yeah.
I want to be able to see whether my host-based firewall is turned on, so that I'm protected. Doesn't matter if I move my laptop somewhere else and so on. Um, so it kind of looks like that when I receive a machine, that I should be adequately protected, right? And and I hope organizations think that, when they issue a machine, that they have a process for dealing with things like this. Now, so some of the things at the moment, that people should consider as well is backups. No,
Oh,
very
yeah. Yeah.
often, very often, when we do some incident response work for other clients and so on, one of the very first things that we ask, do you have a backup?
Mm,
And there's
yeah.
usually this awkward silence of, I think so. I think so. So, um, and the whole point of us trying to do the patching and the passwords and antivirus and firewall is
Yeah.
it's to try, it's not to try and avoid the question about do I have a backup, but it's to try in
No.
case of if anything of those things go wrong,
Mm,
that we have a
yeah.
process of, right, you know, worst case scenario, there's something we can recover. So
Yes,
which
of
is
course.
great. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So
It's so backup. Just to go on that, backups aren't actually a requirement of Cyber Essentials, but they're a really good recovery method for getting you out of trouble if, is as Kerry said, if one of those measures doesn't work or something more complex that's beyond what Cyber Essentials is designed to protect you from. You having that, it gives you that insurance policy of having that backup to protect you from a particularly awkward ransomware or something like that.
ah, now we're getting
Yeah.
to ransomware. So 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 if I was running my machine as my account and I'm running as admin,
Yeah.
I don't have adequate antivirus. I'm
Mhm.
not patched.
Yeah.
Um, so I would be at serious risk being at running as an administrator. Because I
Yes,
mean,
correct. Yeah.
I've got all the privileges in the world on my
Yes.
machine.
Yeah.
Even if I'm a software developer,
Yeah.
right? Especially if I'm a a developer, I think. So
Mhm.
so in terms of requirements of the scheme, am I allowed to run as an admin?
The requirement of the scheme is that you don't do all your day-to-day work with admin privileges or run as an admin account. The scheme really requires you to have two separate accounts. One as a standard user, where you do your email work and you type your Word documents up, your Excel documents, all that. Your day-to-day work is done in that. So if you happen to have a threat come through on your email and you click on a dodgy link or something like that, that there's no admin rights to run some software or something in the background, which is what they're preying on you to have, is those admin rights. So what we're looking for is you running a day-to-day account which has no admin rights, etc. on that, or admin privileges, and then you have a separate administrator account. So when you do require it, you put in a separate username and a different password, and then you can install that software or whatever the requirement is at the time. But it allows you to make that extra decision and that you are aware something else is going on. And you can say then when you ask for your admin details and you go, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Why has that happened? It gives you that extra time to sit back and think and before you go ahead with that installing that software or something.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really good. That's really good. So,
Mm.
so to hook up, so it's a separate account that I'm not
Yes,
using as my daily account, as in,
that's right.
and
Yeah.
I'm only using that to install updates and things like that. And normally the updater will be able to install updates anyway. So so what happens if I've got really old software that's no longer supported? So, for example, I have, say, for example, a phone system. It's important to the organization. It's no
Mm.
longer supported. Um, it's not being used as an end user device, for example. Nobody's
Mm.
using it to go into the internet or anything else like that, or check mail or play games
Mm.
or whatever. So, would stuff like that still be allowed?
If you've descoped it and made sure there's no internet connection to those devices, such as a phone system, but actually phone systems don't currently come under the scope of Cyber Essentials. If there was a management server that was perhaps using unsupported operating systems such as Server 2003 or 2008, um, that would be different. You know,
Right. Yeah.
they're no longer patched or updated with security updates. So you'll have, even though they may be on the latest version of the updates, but those updates may have been 2003 from 2012 or 2013. They haven't been patched for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
Microsoft haven't released any updates, so it's still vulnerable to attack. And we often see that when we, on the higher level of Cyber Essentials, where people have these systems called so where the higher level being an audited version of Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, that they do a vulnerability, an internal vulnerability, and it shows that perhaps because they're a legacy system, what we call older systems now, that is shown now as a vulnerability in your network because it may have vulnerabilities on there that have come out. If we take a legacy piece of software, and if I steal anybody's thunder here, sorry, we'll talk about a very prevalent or very common piece of software was Flash Player. Flash Player went end of life at the end of 2020 on the 31st of December. It was a very public end of life about that. But the last patch for that was earlier in that quarter, towards the end of 2020. It's since been discovered there's a vulnerability within that piece of software, which is likely to never be patched by the vendor because they've dropped support for it. And that's a real concern, having those legacy systems in there. And often you can do mitigations, which is not something we allow in Cyber Essentials,
Okay.
but those systems cost a lot of money to put in place and go beyond the realms of Cyber Essentials. We're looking with Cyber Essentials at basic security options, and it's a very basic thing to get in your head to say all software you're using must be currently supported by the vendor and receiving regular security updates.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the recommendation then is like specifically for Flash would be to say, okay, Flash unsupported. Microsoft said it would be removed. We
Yeah.
must check that it's actually been removed and no longer a threat
Yeah.
to our organization. Because I don't think anywhere at the moment, operating system wise, there are anything requiring Flash in its native form. There's always a couple of plugins where they've um, worked around the requirement for Flash, but not Flash itself anymore. So, okay. Now,
Yeah.
unlicensed software. Can I have my dodgy copy that I've downloaded?
Equally, it's the same thing because if it's unlicensed, you're not receiving the updates you require. We see this with some larger vendors, that goes outside the realms of your Windows, so your Citrix and whatever. If you don't pay for the licensing and pay, you're not going to receive the security updates which are required for Cyber Essentials. Again, it's about having those vendor supplied security updates
Okay. So
and making
every
sure that the product, yeah,
so
sorry, Kerry.
everything that we've talked about so far today is
Mm,
about the basics. Just
yes,
keep the basics in place. So nothing so far is rocket science. Nothing so far is something that we have to go out and buy. Nothing, unless of course it's old operating systems and you need to upgrade to new ones.
Yeah.
to make them supported. I fully
Hmm.
understand that if there is some things that are business critical, that they must be supported.
Yeah.
So don't run as an admin. Must make sure you get updates. Don't run unlicensed software. So now, because all of these things that we've done so far, um, all of the types of viruses, ransomwares, and disasters. So
Mm.
the vast majority of those things are preventable issues
That's
that can be
correct. Yeah.
done with Cyber Essentials. So
Mm.
I remember when the first questionnaires first came around, um, and it was about all of the things you can do to protect yourself against hacks that have already occurred. Right, the most common hacks, and I think
Right.
it's about 50 of them.
Mm.
Guessing your
Mm.
password, having an unsafe system, not having a firewall or a poorly managed firewall, and so on.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the message here is that is if we don't do anything like this or don't go through the steps, we are putting ourselves at great risk by
Yeah.
ignoring
That's correct. Yeah.
these things for our businesses. So it may be a thing like, say, for example, like an MOT, right? So
Yes. Yes.
everybody has to receive an MOT every year on their car to be able to
Yeah.
drive on the road, to get insurance and making sure everything is fine. Because
Hmm.
without that, essentially you are not safe on the road. But to get through the MOT, it's checking that your tires are all right, your lights work. Um,
Mm.
you're not going to fall through a hole in the bottom of your car. so, so, and it's not about having to be able to race around a racetrack,
No,
competing
that's
with,
right. Yeah.
with the top guys. It's just a case of,
Mm.
am I going to be safe? If I check
Yes.
my system today, am I going to be safe on the road? And I suppose
Mm.
similarly, the same analogy can be applied to things like in a supply chain, where if I'm going to be doing business with somebody,
Yeah.
how do I know that they're okay? So
Mm.
how can I check if another business I'm dealing with or having to share information with, how can I check if they're up to date? Do they have a valid certificate and everything else?
Yeah, that's a very important point, the supply chain. We get lots of queries and questions about supply chains, but it gives you that confidence, doesn't it? That your suppliers, and you may get demands on the supply chain from your procurement teams when you're bidding for contracts or something like that. They're looking for that assurance that you have tackled the basic cybersecurity measures. Now it's clear these measures are in and all the requirements of Cyber Essentials. They're designed to protect you from 80% of commodity internet attacks. Okay, so that's a high percentage, and there is more research out there to say perhaps that actually the measures in Cyber Essentials protect you from 92%, I believe it was quoted
Wow.
in a study by Lancaster, a department at Lancaster University, I believe it was. And these measures are really important, but that's where the supply chain, they get their confidence. We see it with the MOD. They made it a requirement that Cyber Essentials to apply for a contract now is a requirement. We see it with local government. We see it with government contracts, and many come through requiring this. And they may want them to go beyond Cyber Essentials self-assessment and want the higher level, the Cyber Essentials Plus, but it gives people that confidence, and they can search a widely available database which is on the NCSC website and also on the IASME website, which shows you which companies are certified. And to give a little bit more reassurance to the certification, it now has to be annually renewed as well. So your certificate only lasts for 12 months. So at least like an MOT, you're saying, well, at least they're checking and it's in place for 12 months, and that's a change from what it was before April the 1st, 2020. So anybody who applied after that, now their certificate will only last for 12 months. Anybody who applied before, their certificates will run out at the end of June, and they will have to reapply on the 12-month cycle.
Okay, so yeah, so like the MOT, so we can
Yeah.
now check or have at least an annual check to things that we have, things we need to check, things to see if some things are broken or unsupported, so we can fix them before the next annual check comes along, ideally.
Yeah.
No, but also I think perhaps it will give us an idea of stuff that are potentially going to break in the next couple of months. At least
Yes.
that will give businesses a way to plan ahead, so that they're not suddenly exposed to a risk that could be, that could have been mitigated by, by upgrades and stuff, so on.
Yeah.
So with all of this, because a lot of the things that we have in place is planning to deal with an incident, and everything so far we've said is to try and avoid that incident to happen in the first place. Okay, so if we have a process for password compromises, we can change it. If if we manage user accounts, so if we have, for example, a staff member join the organization, there is a process that can help them onboard the process or onboard
That's
the new
correct. Yeah.
employee, in terms of having a device that is all safe, patched with antivirus, a default firewall on, or a firewall on by default rather.
Yeah.
They've been issued by a password, and they know how to change the password. They're certainly not going to run as an admin, so, and similarly, if a person leaves an organization, it's like, is there now a process to take their
Yeah.
privileges away? And it's a case of, yes, we know what access that particular person had, what systems they had access to. So it should be easy to revoke a lot of the privileges without the fear of them having been an administrator that could have
Yeah.
damaged some systems in some way, shape, or form. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's been really, really good so far, because all the things, like as I said, didn't cost anything. It's just stuff
No.
that we need to just enable, check, and verify, and so
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Now, it doesn't matter whether we're running Windows operating system. If we're running Mac operating systems, I anticipate that we will most likely need to run antivirus, a better antivirus, because
Yes.
just last week there is a brand new strain of malware targeting very specific versions, editions of Mac OS.
Yeah. That's good. That's correct.
The
Yeah.
brand new architecture and so on. So security by obscurity is no longer an option.
No. 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 I think you make a good point about the Macs there. They do have an element of protection in them, but it's probably the one area where, with your end user devices, you seriously should be buying a third party anti-malware solution. There's many on the market now, but it is clear that the Macs are vulnerable to these internet threats, and there are a lot of published vulnerabilities out there. And Mac and Apple and the Mac OS, they're always there's loads of updates come out. Their monthly update packs or whatever, or they're not really on the schedule like that, but often contain 40 vulnerabilities that need to be patched, etc. And we've seen a huge growth in malware for specifically designed for the Mac devices.
Okay.
And
So what about
yeah.
Chromebooks?
Now you've put me on the spot now, haven't you? Chromebooks, right. Chromebooks are slightly different. They have one of the most rigid patching or update processes on the market. Their operating systems last about 8 weeks.
Wow.
And also, um, the operating system lasts for 8 weeks, but a part of that process is you can only the latest version will have security updates. So there's a lot of extra things go on with Chromebooks. Yes, they can be configured to fit the scheme of Cyber Essentials, but they also have a thing in there where they have a sandboxed environment. It's all part of the process. Um, One of the things we do as a sole partner, we try to talk to the vendors and find out about the latest cybersecurity measures, etc. And we've been talking to Google about the Chromebook and what's in place. But the Chromebook does meet the requirements of Cyber Essentials for
Okay.
the anti-malware. One of the options in the anti-malware section is about using Sandbox. Now,
Right.
Google have informed us that every app on there has its own individual sandbox when it runs, which meets the requirements of Cyber Essentials.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
again, so the patching part of it as well, also, that if you have auto update turned on there, meets the requirements of Cyber Essentials. And it's vendors like Google and uh, Apple with their mobile devices, which are also part of the scheme. They are pushing the boundaries and trying to get people to update their devices quicker. That's not meaning go out and buy a new one. That means they're providing security updates faster. They want you to apply them quicker because everybody we're in a cloud. Everybody wants to trust whatever their their end user device and protect them from these threats ultimately. And this is where lots of things interlink with Cyber Essentials. It's driving transformation within the supply chains because they're wanting their clients or they're for a contract requirement to be more cyber secure when they're handling their data. And that's good evidence for it. So if you're going to use a Chromebook, they should know and have confidence if you've got CE that their data is safer because their devices are being updated on a regular. And when
Right.
they send an email to them with their company specific details on it, it's got that level of protection in it. And it's just about having, levels of trust and confidence in the
Yep.
suppliers and your supply chain.
Okay,
So it's a
fantastic.
big push.
All right. So, another controversial question. So I'm gonna put you on the spot. What about these things? Mobile devices.
Right now, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so
big questions around this with Cyber Essentials, and yes, we have a lot of push on these. Again, they need the same requirements. They must be supported and receiving regular security updates. Um, we get a lot of pushback about the different updates that come from Apple for the iOS operating system. But as far as Cyber Essentials requirement is, they need to be using the latest version, which currently is iOS 14, because the only supported devices, which is also important in Cyber Essentials, is the only supported devices from Apple is the requirement that it has iOS 14 on. The devices out there, because they still send regular, well, they call them ad hoc updates for iOS, is iOS 12. Those patches, if you look at them, cover 2 or 3 patches a time. They're nowhere near as comprehensive as the iOS 14 patches. And also, they don't often cover the kernel, which is the operating system of those devices. So, for Cyber Essentials, you need to have a supported device on the iOS, the Apple iPhone, and it must have the latest iPhone operating system on there, which is iOS 14.
okay. So does that mean I can have any version of 14, 14.1, 2, 3, 4, or
Yes, yeah.
okay. So because
But
quite
what the important thing there, Kerry, is that you still need to demonstrate if you list in your application, you still need to say so still need to be applying the 14-day patches. So ideally, you would see that you've got 14.4 on at the moment,
Yes.
and then you're showing that you've turned the automatic updates on, and it's patched within the 14 days.
Okay. Well, that is really good news because um, for a lot of organizations, the mobile phones are often ignored, missed,
Mm,
and things like that. And in many cases, there is a BYOD device in play.
yeah,
Um, so, would a company have or an organization have to have a policy to tell their employees to say, hey, if you're going to be having access to um, company data on your mobile, like for example mail,
yeah.
um, you we have to make sure that you are staying up to date.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes. So if you have your email on a BYOD device, again, the device still needs to meet the requirements of Cyber Essentials. You know, that is company or what we call for the scheme organizational data is on that device, and you're connecting to an organizational service. So that device still needs to meet the requirements. Um, it's it causes we know it causes a few issues. I know BYOD, many people come out there and often, we get a lot of pushback and a lot of inquiries about iPhones, but the Android devices are just a challenge as well.
I can
Um,
imagine.
so it does include those as well. So yes, it does, and it is clearly in the requirements document that it states that BYOD devices are in scope for the scheme.
Okay, well,
Hmm.
yeah, okay, so again, so far everything that we've mentioned so far, be it
Mm,
passwords, patching,
mm,
devices and everything else, if we have a recent phone, it
yeah,
gets free updates.
yeah.
I don't really need to do anything special to
No,
comply
you
with
don't need
Cyber
to buy
Essential.
anything special. No, no, because for Cyber Essentials, as I said previously, we're a bit pragmatic about the approach, and so there's a bit. You don't need a mobile device management to be compliant with Cyber Essentials. You don't need an MAM or a mobile app management system. What you need, you can do it by a written home working BYOD policy, anything like that. As long as you are in charge of the process and you know what apps on your mobile phones, and that's the BYOD, are accessing your organizational data or services, that's compliant for Cyber Essentials. So you can have a written policy that your users sign to, like any other policy you would ask them to in your employment.
Okay, okay, well you know that's been a very comprehensive run through everything,
Yeah,
and I don't think we've missed anything so far. There's a couple of comments in the
yeah,
in the chat that everybody liked the MOT type analogy
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's like it gives me peace of mind that
Mm,
that I know my car is safe. I'm not going to die just driving it for something I could have fixed and so on. And
that's right. Yeah.
similarly, if I was to use a computer, I'm not going to be um, unnecessarily be exposed to a threat that could have been prevented. And trying to keep us safe. I think that's a really good a
Yeah.
good way to try and explain it. Any other advice that you may want? I know
Well,
it's been a
if
long
you
day
want
so
it,
far.
Nah, if you'd like, general advice is, I think one of the great things about Cyber Essentials, and I say this a lot, is that in your own life, these are measures you should put in your home life, on your home kit, etc., for your home network. I think they're simple measures. They won't cost you any. They shouldn't cost you anything than anything you would normally do on your own devices. We'd all put an anti-malware program on. I think we're all versed in that. Should be common practice anyway.
Yep.
And I just think it's simple stuff to protect you. You get the same threats come through your own personal email address as you're likely to your company email address. So I would put the measures in place. That's my advice. I think you just build it into your IT builds at home, wherever, on any device you do. Just
Yeah.
apply them. It's
Yeah.
very good, simple advice.
And especially for new businesses starting out.
Yeah.
They're so focused on their idea of being a business and how to,
Yeah.
what they are going to do. They often forget the security aspect of what they're going to need to do. But
Yeah.
fortunately, I think with the requirement that if you're going to be part of any procurement process and anything else, this is going to be that one thing to say, hey, it's all great that you want to be
Yeah.
able to participate in everything,
Mm.
but just take a moment back, have a look at your security. Have you got all these things in place? And I think
Yeah.
the questionnaire that the folks can follow, it's something that they can follow, work through, and see what is required. Now,
Yeah.
so another tough question. How much does Cyber Essentials cost? Or how much should it cost?
The Cyber Essentials self-assessment certificate should cost £300 plus that.
Okay. So not
Very simple.
3,000.
That's not 3,000. No, that's the straight certification fee to just
Yeah.
go through the certification process. Obviously, if you need further assistance with that, you would talk to a certifying body such as ID
Yeah.
Cyber and discuss with them, and they can provide you with consultancy if you needed additional help to obtain the certificate. If you need to go to the next level, which is the audited level, which is Cyber Essentials Plus, there is a standard fee, which I believe is £450. I don't get involved in that because it's actually handled by the CBs normally.
Right.
So there is a set fee for it. And I'm sure, Kerry, you could tell us the set fee better than
Yeah.
I can. You do more of them.
Yeah. So there's obviously the fees that we paid directly to IASME,
Yeah.
to be able to produce the certificate, and like you said, that is the amount that that we normally pay, and then there's obviously the test itself. The test, going through it, and the preparation and everything else for that. So, but but thank you very much. I want to see if there's any more questions from everybody else. No. Okay, so we're in the last sort of 2 minutes of
Yeah.
our afternoon. First thing from me is thank you so much for joining us today. Although I know a lot about the scheme and everything else, we've been involved and everything else.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure that when we have this opportunity to be able to speak to each other, pose the question, get the answer back, right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. I'm not saying you're a horse. So that. Because there's a lot of folks on this that are considering Cyber Essentials for their businesses and so on. So, and thank you so much for being our guest this afternoon. And,
Yeah, no problem.
And hopefully we'll be in touch soon again. I think we have another session on Friday on another panel.
Yes, we have my own session on Friday. Yes,
I'll be on the hot spot then.
So Kerry will be on the panel for that with a member of the Scottish Government and one other as well. So
Okay.
Yes, we have another question and answer session. So please look that up for later in the week if you have further questions out of this session. That'd be great. But yeah, and look, we all know that people, not or everybody dealing with Cyber Essentials in each business is an IT expert at all, or had very little knowledge, please come to Find Your CB, so your certifying body such as ID Cyber, or come to iASME direct, and we'll put you in touch with a CB to start you on the journey.
Oh, well,
Okay.
thank you so much for
Yeah.
all of this. Unfortunately, our time has run out. It's been absolutely fabulous having you.
Yeah.
So,
Excellent.
all right. Well, thank you very
All
much
right then.
for everybody joining us this afternoon. I hope it's been helpful. I hope there's been something that you could take away from this. And this chat has been recorded. It will stay on YouTube. So if you want to review it and so on, that's great. If you want to subscribe to the channel as well, we'll add all the videos from this entire week to this whole series and so on. So, well, from all of us, thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, we'll see you during the rest of the week.
Yeah. Thank you.